Okay, so another question we had was the life insurance application process. What should people expect? What's involved? And then a subset of that we got quite a few questions about was the necessity for a medical exam. You have a lot of people that are afraid of needles and doctors and want to know how to get around that. And I think maybe if you could speak to that, because even myself, I mean, I'm not a fan of the doctor, but it's not that invasive. It's blood and it's other samples.
Blood?
But it's not, I mean, it's not like you're getting a full, you're not going through a CAT scan, you're not doing all kinds of stress tests or anything like that. So if you could dispel that, because we got quite a few around that.
Well, going back, when I first got in the business, even up to $1 million, we were able to issue without a medical exam. I wrote $1 million on my wife back in 1986 with no medical exam, just to answer a bunch of questions. If you say you're healthy, we'll believe you, and we'll issue $1 million policy.
Can I just ask you on the no medical, though, in terms of age ranges, are there certain age ranges that only would apply to?
Generally, no medical insurance is available typically up to about age 60, and no medical insurance today is different than it was when I issued it on my spouse back in 1986. So I hope I don't lose track of all the questions, as this is a multi-part question. But the process generally goes as follows. People call in, we would, or if you met with an agent face-to-face, however you do it, you decide on what product you want, how much you want, what kind, and then we take an application. The application is basically legally an invitation to the carrier to make an offer of insurance. And so you're asked and you must answer honestly all of the questions on the application. They're going to ask you background questions. Are you the kind of person that do you regularly dive out of planes and skydive? Are you into scuba diving down to 300 feet? Are you doing anything hazardous? What's your medical history? What medications are you on? How much do you weigh? And then starting in the late 80s, because of the prevalence of AIDS at that time, the carriers wanted to screen out people that had HIV positive or that were HIV positive. And so they started examining everybody by doing blood tests. And once they got those blood tests, they became addicted to all of the other information they could find out about you by looking at your blood. And so they would be looking for cholesterol, triglycerides. There's 30 or 40 things they're checking for, including cocaine and nicotine, because if people lie, smoking is a huge, huge factor in terms of pricing. Smokers in their 30s would pay about 4 times as much for a 20-year term as a non-smoker that's healthy. It's a big difference. So people would lie about that. Now, once they have their blood, it's harder to lie about that. So for the last 20 or 30 years, the blood test and the urine specimen has been part of the underwriting process. So you answer the questions on the application, an exam is scheduled, the examiner comes to your house. Is it a hassle? I don't know. I mean, it's 30 to 40 minutes. You answer some questions. You get the copy of the blood results, so it's actually sort of a free exam. The insurance company's paying for it. But like you said, not everybody wants a stranger coming into their home to stick them with a needle. So what's happened lately as a result of the prevalence and development of big data, there's a lot of information that's out there that wasn't out there 30 years ago. Are you taking prescription drugs? If you ask that question to a client nowadays and they say they're not, there's a prescription database that can be checked. And if they're taking drugs for high blood pressure and they say they're not, it's going to show up anyway. And that could be a problem for the application process, because if you're not honest, they could decline you for just lack of candor. But the bottom line is that there are carriers out there that right now up to $500,000, we can get that up to age 60 with no exam whatsoever at fully underwritten pricing. In the past, if you asked me 5 years ago, I could have said, yeah, you could get $500,000 with no exam, but it used to cost 2 to 3 times as much as the kind where they had the opportunity to examine your blood and make sure you were one of the good risks. Now they're willing to take a shot based upon the data that's out there that you are one of the good risks and get you very, very close. In some cases, it actually is sometimes the lowest price, even without the exam, which is really, really cool. There is a limit, though. You can't get $3 million without an exam. Unless you started stacking some of these together. And I think ultimately, for the larger face amounts, they're still more comfortable with an exam because the carrier is taking a huge risk. They're taking literally, you're talking for $1 million policy, let's say, I don't know, $50 a month. I mean, $50 a month, and they're willing to pay you $1 million if you die. They kind of need to know what they're getting involved in. And so they like the exam, they're more comfortable with the exam, but they recognize that the market pressures with some carriers doing these without exams is causing other carriers to sort of follow suit. And competition, which is obviously good, I mean, capitalism actually does work pretty well in the life insurance industry. That's the answer to the question that many of you may be thinking, why have rates come down by 60% over the past 20 years? It's basically capitalism working really, really well. The information flow today is so incredible that if a carrier is not competitive, everybody knows it, and they can't sell anything. And so they're forced to be competitive. And so that's why the rates continued to, it was basically a price war for the last 20 years, is why rates have inched their way down.
Right, so the highlight there is if people are very opposed to doctor's medical exam, there's lots of options.
Assuming the face amount they want is say up to $500,000, there's some carriers that are now going to $1 million.
And something they should look into if they hadn't heard about before, and it sounds
Absolutely.
like there's many carriers doing it.
Absolutely, and good carriers. I mean, we're not talking about Fred's Life of Tuscaloosa. We're talking about major carriers that you've heard of that are A+ rated that are now issuing contracts, life insurance contracts, without a medical exam.
Okay, great.